Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. Save a trip to the doctor and let their pharmacists test and prescribe your medicines. From strep throat to birth control to UTIs and migraines. Stop into the store or schedule online at safeway.com/pharmacy.
With temperatures rising this week, you may feel like cooling down in a creek. Do keep in mind water levels and flows are high right now and are expected to rise in the coming days as more snowpack melts. On Clear Creek in Jefferson County, some activities like swimming and tubing are now prohibited until levels go down. Those in kayaks, canoes, and larger rafts are warned to use extreme caution and, of course, to use safety gear. I'm Bazi Kanani. Coming up, what the state tried to do about the Boulder firebomb suspect before the attack.
There was a specific moment he got on their radar, November 22nd, 2024.
Then, Denver claims to make history in cutting unsheltered homelessness.
That would be the largest multi-year reduction in U.S. history.
We fact-check the claim. Plus, some fruit crops on the western slope suffered in a severe hailstorm.
It was pretty devastating. It was a tough night.
It's Wednesday, June 11th. Here's what's happening in Colorado today. We've learned that Colorado law enforcement alerted federal authorities late last year that the suspect in the Boulder firebomb attack tried to buy a gun. This notification to federal officials seems to contradict statements from Congressman Gabe Evans. He's suggested that Colorado's state immigration laws kept federal authorities from taking action that might have prevented the attack that injured 15 people earlier this month. CPR's Allison Sherry is here to explain. Allison, the suspect in the attack is from Egypt and had sought asylum in the U.S., though he didn't have legal status otherwise. When did he get on the radar of law enforcement in Colorado?
There was a specific moment he got on their radar, November 22nd, 2024, months before he decided to throw firebombs at people in Boulder. It was that date when he tried to buy a handgun in Colorado Springs. It's federally illegal to buy a gun if you're an asylum seeker and have no other legal status here. So he was denied. But that's when the Colorado Bureau of Investigation first became aware of him.
And can you explain the argument that Congressman Evans is making?
Congressman Evans says that Colorado's policies are too friendly to immigrants and hinder immigration enforcement. Here's Evans at a press conference with other House Republicans yesterday.
And unfortunately, in my Colorado, which is a sanctuary state that prohibits at times state and local law enforcement from being able to work with federal authorities, I can't help but wonder if this attack might have been prevented had the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, which is who does the background checks for firearm purchases in Colorado, had they been able to flag that for one of the multiple different entities that have been set up to share that information and prevent something like this from happening.
The congressman also has a resolution blaming so-called sanctuary policies for this attack in Boulder, and he's had to fend off accusations that he's politicizing a tragedy to make a point.
So for clarity, what did happen when the suspect tried to buy a gun? What have you found? Did Colorado actually do anything with that information?
They did, and they always do when someone is denied purchase of a weapon. Contrary to what Evans says, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation notified federal immigration officials and local law enforcement officials about his attempt to buy a gun within minutes of his attempt to purchase at this gun store. That notification happens almost instantly via email.
So this happened in late 2024. What could immigration authorities have done at that point or in the months since then? In other words, could they have prevented the attack?
There's no indication that anyone from ICE took action on the notification sent by Colorado. It's hard to say what could or wouldn't have happened, preventing something that we didn't know was going to happen. But I did ask ICE for an explanation. They did not immediately provide one. I also asked just broadly, even if they didn't want to speak on this exact case, how they might use background check information for immigration enforcement. They also didn't answer those questions either. Obviously, given the timeline, the notification happened when Joe Biden was still president. The election had happened, but he was still there. That is notable, and Congressman Evans responded to our reporting yesterday in part by blaming Biden's immigration enforcement policies. But I will say that it's more notable that President Trump has not acted on this information for a number of reasons. One, this happened in the last 6 weeks of a lame duck president versus the first 6 months of a very active president. And immigration is, as we've reported on this show and everywhere, is one of this administration's very top priorities. They have embarked on a very wide-ranging effort to try to deport as many people every single day as possible. And here is a sort of low-hanging fruit, people who've tried to buy firearms but have been denied because of their immigration status, and it doesn't appear that they've really done anything with this information. As we've reported, they're doing work site raids, they're going to Target and grabbing people on their lunch hour. Meanwhile, they apparently are not taking action against someone who tried to buy a gun and also tried to get a concealed carry permit and was denied both times.
As we have this conversation, we do want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the bigger story here, which is that it seems the suspect used any means available to attack a group that was peacefully walking to support hostages taken by Hamas. Your reporting provides us one more piece of the puzzle about what led up to this attack.
Yeah, and because he couldn't get guns, and he said this to authorities, he put together the most rudimentary weapon, that you can get. It's gasoline and wine bottles in a Molotov cocktail. But this is, specifically sort of shows how systems could have possibly been used to at least identify this person as a threat to people.
Thanks for the update.
You're welcome.
Denver says this week that it set a national record in cutting one kind of homelessness. The mayor's office points to new federal data that suggests the city cut unsheltered homelessness by nearly half since 2023. That would be a huge step in the right direction for Mayor Mike Johnston, who has pledged to end unsheltered homelessness in the city by 2027. Denverite's Kyle Harris is here to help us understand this claim, whether the city really is making history. Kyle, first of all, where do these numbers come from? How do they measure unsheltered homelessness?
Sure. Well, the numbers come from the point-in-time count, and this is basically a snapshot in time. So every January, the Metro Denver Homelessness Initiative recruits a bunch of people. They fan out across the city, and they try to count how many people are living without shelter on that night.
What kinds of situations are they looking for when they're out there? What's considered to be living without a shelter?
Well, it's really anyone who's living outside. This could be in tents or in cars or really any spaces that aren't meant for people to live in. That's the number that's dropped by around 45% since 2023. And according to the mayor's office, that would be the largest multi-year reduction in U.S. history.
45% is a significant amount. That sounds encouraging.
It is. But on that night in January, the survey also counted data from the shelters. And it's important to note that data shows that there are more people living indoors. And in fact, the total number of people experiencing homelessness has actually gone up in the same period of time by nearly 30%.
Wow. So clearly, homelessness continues to be a big challenge for the city. A lot of money and effort has been focused on at least getting people sheltered. Kyle, you've reported that it's hard to measure progress on who's unsheltered. Why is that?
So if you measure only one night of the year, there are all sorts of variables like weather that can impact the numbers. That might partially explain why this snapshot, this point-in-time survey, saw more people in shelters than outside. For example, this January and also January 2023 were much colder than last year. So more people could have been counted as sheltered during those years simply because on that one night they had to come inside. And there's a whole load of other factors you can imagine affecting point in time. You have migration flows as a really relevant example in Denver. If you have thousands of people come to the city without homes, the count obviously goes up.
So the data is limited, measured each year on just that one night. Do we really know for sure, then, that the city's made progress on reducing unsheltered homelessness?
Well, the data is imperfect, but it is kind of the best that we have when it comes to counting unsheltered homelessness. Now, anecdotally speaking, visibly, you look around Denver, you're going to see way fewer encampments than you did a few years ago. But what you're not going to see is that the number of people living in shelters is higher than it's ever been under Mayor Mike Johnston. Affordability is a massive problem. Eviction case rates have soared in Denver County Court over the last couple of years. And, the city is trying to get people into permanent housing situations, but that process has been slow. And it could basically grind to a halt if proposed cuts to federal funding go through.
There are some strong headwinds here. Denverite's Kyle Harris, thank you.
Thank you.
It's remarkable how much damage 10 minutes of hail can cause.
It's just a huge bummer. I mean, my husband and our guys who you just saw spend hours upon hours upon hours out here every week working these orchards, and just blood, sweat, and tears into them. And to have a 10-minute hailstorm wipe out your entire year, it sucks.
On Sunday in western Colorado, in the fruit-producing region of our state, storms dumped hail up to 2 inches in diameter. That's larger than a golf ball. Laura Black owns Mesa Park Fruit Company near Palisade and says she felt helpless when she realized the storm was about to hit her orchard.
We actually weren't here. We were in Grand Junction, and it hailed pretty hard down there. And so we called the lady who owns this property and said, hey, let us know if it hits over here. So about 15 minutes later, she sent a couple videos of just an absolute downpouring of hail. So as soon as we found out, we have a 3-year-old, so I kind of handled her, and my husband came out here to assess the damage, and it was pretty devastating. It was it was a tough night.
The next morning, Black went out to inspect the crop.
So you can see right here, I mean, you can see in the leaves that's all from hail, how the leaves are just destroyed. And then the cherries, if you look at the cherries themselves, all this bruising and then being torn open, that's all just from hail. So all of this fruit that you see right here is just going to get dropped to the ground.
The cherries were just about to get harvested, but now Black won't be able to sell any of the crop that was damaged by the hail. In the next few days, she'll let it drop to the ground, then trash the rotting fruit. It's a sight that most farmers dread. Thankfully, the storm was extremely localized, which meant that some of the orchard was not affected at all.
So we're estimating that we have 50% crop loss. The fruit on the east side was protected because the storm blew in from the west. And so the fruit on the east side, most of it looks okay. So you can see, we can look right here. So see these guys? Those are beautiful cherries. So it's almost like the fruit on the west side protected the fruit on the east side.
Black's orchard wasn't the only farm to experience this localized damage to its crops. Colorado State University's research site in Orchard Mesa was also hit hard. It produces crops that get donated to food banks and pantries. Its peaches, apples, grapes, and cherries got wiped out. So they'll have fewer pounds of food to donate this year, and maybe even in future years, because of damage to the trees themselves, making them more vulnerable to disease. Also, Black says,
the guys that have the peach orchards on the other side of the road from us, they have a little bit of damage too, little dings, but nothing like this. So, yeah, that winery that got hit, Mafia Princess Wines is the name of it. I went over there on Saturday morning I took some cherries over to them and give them a hug, and they just got annihilated. But, I mean, that's how localized it was. You could be a quarter mile away and you'd be fine.
Black won't be able to get insurance money from the federal government since her cherry crop is less than 5 years old. Ultimately, though, she says she's grateful that not every grower was affected. Reporting for today's show also came from CPR's Caitlin Kim, Stina Sieg, and Tom Hess. Stay up to date on the top stories happening in your state from a news source you trust. Follow Colorado Today in your podcast app. I'm Bazi Kanani. This is CPR News.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. Save a trip to the doctor and let their pharmacists test and prescribe your medicines. From strep throat to birth control to UTIs and migraines. Stop into the store or schedule online at safeway.com/pharmacy.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.